Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: President-elect Trump is inviting Chinese leader Xi Jinping to attend the inauguration next January, a ceremony no Chinese leader has ever attended. What's behind Trump's move?
He's dealing a subtle blow to Xi Jinping's ambition.
Growing security concerns over mysterious drone sightings above New Jersey. More on the alarming new details coming to light.
We have no idea where they're taking off from. No idea.
The battle over critical minerals is intensifying. What solutions do lawmakers suggest to cut America's China reliance on materials needed to make weapons? And a number of China-related bills did not make it into the 2025 defense budget. White House Speaker Mike Johnson vows to get them signed into law anyway. An unprecedented move from President-elect Trump. He has invited Chinese leader Xi Jinping to attend his inauguration next January. It's unclear if Xi has accepted the invitation. If he does, he would become the first Chinese leader to attend a U.S. presidential inauguration. Incoming White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the news on Fox and Friends Thursday morning.
And this is an example of President Trump creating an open dialogue with leaders of countries that are not just our allies, but our adversaries and our competitors, too.
She added Trump made similar moves during his first term and that it led to more global peace, despite his taking a lot of criticism for those actions. Leavitt went on to say that Trump is willing to talk to anyone and that he will always put America's interest first. She explained that other world leaders have been invited, which is also unusual. No foreign leader has attended a U.S. inauguration in over a century, though ambassadors often attend. Tan Jingyun is a China affairs commentator. He says by inviting Xi and world leaders to watch him return to the center of global power, Trump is sending a strong political signal.
That the world order as led by the U.S. is unshakable, and Trump is here to defend it.
Tang added that the invitation might serve another purpose as well, to weaken Xi Jinping's status.
Chinese propaganda has been promoting Xi Jinping as a world leader, one that's equal to the U.S. president.
Tang noted by inviting Xi as a guest, Trump is declaring that his own power surpasses Xi's on the world stage.
He's dealing a subtle blow to Xi Jinping's ambition, which is to be in charge of the world order along with the U.S. Diplomatically, it's a very delicate maneuver.
Lastly, Tang noted that Trump often uses a carrot and stick strategy to achieve his goals when dealing with regime leaders.
Trump is able to exert immense pressure on them, showing that he has power and that he will use it. On the other hand, he also shows dictators like Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un respect so that he can better communicate with them to achieve certain things.
Tang says he believes Trump wants to get Xi to concede on multiple fronts: trade, the Russia-Ukraine war, and a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. He has threatened 60% tariffs on Chinese goods. In a social media post, Trump also wrote that too many lives have been wasted in Russia's war on Ukraine. He added that it's Putin's time to act, that China can help, and that the world is waiting. Weeks of mysterious drone sightings across New Jersey are prompting serious security concerns, and more alarming details are emerging. Let's zoom in.
Today, we learned from the colonel of the state police there was a drone the size of a SUV that was flying under a state helicopter, and that the state helicopter, owned by the state police, when that moved towards the drone shut its lights off and then left the area. This is not some sort of prank. This is not some hobbyist. This is whatever it is, it's people who are seriously involved in drones.
These drones statewide are hovering and appearing to be surveilling New Jersey's critical infrastructure. We have no idea where they're taking off from. No idea. We have no idea where they're landing. No idea at all. We have no idea who's behind them because, as I mentioned, they are not state, and we are told it is not federal.
Homeland Security shared an update on the mysterious drone spotted over New Jersey yesterday. A lawmaker briefed by the department said the drone seemed to avoid detection by helicopter and radio.
In a post on X, Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia wrote the drones appear to be too large to be flown by lobbyists. Hobbyists, rather. The Pentagon says there is no evidence that the drones are being operated by a foreign adversary like Iran. Some New Jersey residents say they have seen drones flying around since last month.
On Thursday, the FBI and DHS jointly issued a statement saying that they have no evidence that the drones pose a national security or public safety threat or that they're connected to foreign states. In other drone-related news, a judge ordered Tuesday a Chinese national to be released from custody without bail on the condition that he would attend future court hearings. The Chinese national has been accused of flying a drone and filming above a military base in California for about an hour 12 days ago. Looking to other tensions between the U.S. and China, China's dominance over the supply of critical minerals is in the spotlight. The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party proposed solutions in a hearing on Wednesday. NTD's Melina Weisskopf was at that meeting on Capitol Hill. Take a listen.
You know, I think the area of allowing the Department of Interior, the Secretary, to do an analysis of what friendly nations we can work with who already are mining, who already are processing and identifying how we can immediately lessen our dependence. To me, that's a very good first step, and then we need to build a stronger infrastructure of doing things here.
We're now investing in our people, in our jobs, in our communities, and in manufacturing, and we're not going to let them win the race for the next century, where America is going to dominate.
Now, there are several issues at hand here, but one of the main issues that we heard from all of the lawmakers is the issue of processing. So in a sense, what happens is that when we do have those minerals, we send them to China for the processing and then buy them back. So we're essentially losing money to be able to have that processing done in China and at the same time giving the Chinese Communist Party more control over those critical minerals. Now, the chairman also listed how dependent we are. So I'll just give you a couple of examples here. So the Chinese Communist Party processes 95% of the world's manganese, 73% of its cobalt, 70% of the graphite, and 3% of global nickel. So you can see how much of a hand the Chinese Communist Party really has over those key minerals. One congressman that I spoke to had very interesting ideas. He gave an example of lithium and the innovation that could be used in order to make lithium obsolete in a sense, so that we could change the game, change the way things are working, so that all of the money and research that the Chinese Communist Party has put into those minerals could be pointless, and then we could really have the upper hand. Listen to what this congressman had to say.
Maybe lithium becomes obsolete. It's not needed because there's a new material that can actually do it better than lithium. And then what you've done is you've changed the paradigm. So they stifle it here where we do it much cleaner. And so what happens? The capacity is shipped overseas to China, where they don't really care about the environment. I mean, all you got to do is go to China. I was there about 7 years ago. I didn't see the sun for 10 days. Why? Because all the pollution.
But one of the problems is that many environmental groups actually try to stifle the process of permitting here in America because they're concerned about the effects on the environment. That's why you heard the congressman say, well, yes, it has some effect on the environment, but if we can do it here and try to mitigate those impacts, that would be much better than relying on the Chinese Communist Party, putting our national security at risk, and at the same time also not helping the environment in any sense.
The 2025 National Defense Authorization Act has passed the House with broad bipartisan support, but a slew of China-related provisions were excluded from the defense bill last minute. How are lawmakers responding? NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more.
House Republicans and House Democrats voted together to pass the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025. The bill authorizes nearly $1 trillion in defense spending. Lawmakers highlighted that this year's NDAA's main focus is the quality of life of service members, with the most junior enlisted service members slated to receive a 14.5% pay increase.
The NDAA supports the deployment of the National Guard to our southern border, deters China, combats anti-Semitism,
Despite broad bipartisan support, the final text of the National Defense Authorization Act was stripped of bills that had already passed on the House floor, some of them with unanimous consent. The Biosecure Act, the Countering CCP Drones Act, and the Falun Gong Protection Act, all bills that had already passed on the House floor and all designed to counter the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party worldwide, were stripped of the final text of this year's NDAA.
The Senate has, or had, another opportunity to include these provisions in the Defense Authorization Act this year. But House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries chose to block. We cannot stand by and continue selling the communists in China the rope they will use to hang the United States of America.
In the end, the China bills and the anti-Semitism bills are missing from this year's NDAA that is now on its way to the Senate. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is vowing to get the measures signed into law by the end of the year, even though they failed to make it into next year's defense bill. If passed, the measures would help Washington counter communist China, enhance U.S. economic security, and urge the Chinese regime to stop human rights violations. Zooming in, one aims to block U.S. investment dollars from funding China's development of sensitive technology like AI, semiconductors, and quantum computing. All those areas are needed to modernize China's military. Beyond the measures that didn't make it in, here's a glimpse of what the 2025 defense bill does cover. One part of the NDAA will restrict the Pentagon from hiring certain defense firms, ones that are tied to lobbyists that work for China. It also puts limits on China's access to U.S. missile information and requires the Pentagon chief to fully assess the risks associated with using DJI drones. DJI is a Chinese drone maker that the Pentagon has designated as a Chinese military company since 2022. In order to fully assess its risks, the bill requires the defense secretary to disassemble a drone and inspect its components. DJI responded, saying the assessment must be evidence-based. Another term included in the bill focuses on Taiwan. It urges the U.S. and European allies to, quote, publicly and repeatedly emphasize that their distinct one-China policies differ from Beijing's. Beijing sees Taiwan as part of Communist China, a stance the democratic island rejects. But the U.S. and European countries officially keep their stances ambiguous. Both recognize that there is only one China, but without specifying which one between China and Taiwan. On top of that, the NDAA tasked the U.S. government with enhancing its ties to Japan and South Korea, as well as boosting its defense presence in the Indo-Pacific with allies like Australia. Coming up, international accusations say Chinese supply chains are plagued with unfair trade practices and rights abuses. How can the U.S., Canada, and Mexico find new alternatives? South Korea's president refusing to step down and vowing to fight till the end, why he's blaming China for his country's biggest political crisis in decades. And relief for Taiwan for now. The island is closing an emergency center opened recently in response to a record Chinese military drill surrounding the island. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now we turn to the political crisis in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol lashed out at his political opponents on Thursday, describing them as anti-state forces. This as calls for his impeachment gather strength. Let's dive in.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol vowed on Thursday to fight to the end, even as his own party shifted closer to vote to impeach him over his short-lived martial law order last week. Yoon's first comment since he apologized for the martial law declaration on Saturday came in the form of a lengthy televised address.
We must prevent the forces and criminal groups that have led the paralysis of government administration and disorder of national constitution from taking over the state administration and threatening the future of the Republic of Korea, no matter what. I will fight to the end.
Yoon went on to claim without evidence that North Korea had hacked South Korea's election commission, throwing doubt on his party's crushing election defeat in April. Yoon also appeared to defend his decision to declare emergency rule in the first place, referring to the opposition Democratic Party, which has blocked some of his proposals, as criminal groups that must be stopped from taking over government. Again, Yoon gave no evidence of criminal activity. Yoon is hoping his political allies will rally to his support, but after watching his fiery address Thursday morning, the leader of Yoon's own People Power Party responded that the time had come for the president to resign or be impeached by parliament. Protests calling for Yoon's impeachment continued in the capital Seoul on Wednesday. A second impeachment vote in parliament is expected on Saturday, a week after the first one failed due to a ruling party boycott.
Yoon also flagged Chinese espionage in the country and called out the South Korean opposition party for blocking legislation to tackle spy activities. He stressed the martial law declaration was a response to that interference. He cited 2 cases. In June, 3 Chinese nationals were arrested for using a drone to film a U.S. carrier while it docked in South Korea's port city, Busan. Authorities found the Chinese nationals had taken hundreds of photos of the country's military bases. And last month, another Chinese citizen was arrested for recording the country's intelligence agency, also with a drone. In response, China condemned Yoon's remarks, calling them deeply unsettling. South Korea is a critical ally of the U.S. and is at the forefront of countering communist influence from China and North Korea. How serious is the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration inside the democratic country? NTD's Flora Hua has more.
The head of South Korea's opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, said Sunday he would push for a second impeachment vote against the president as soon as this week.
If Yoon Suk-yeol is successfully impeached this time, it is highly likely that Lee Jae-myung will come to power, which could result in South Korea shifting to the left. This is something the United States is deeply concerned about, and it is also a major worry for the Japanese.
Guo said the U.S. forces weren't able to have a single drill with the South Korean military during the previous administration led by the opposition party. In recent days, the president accused the opposition party of aligning with communist forces from North Korea. Meanwhile, China has ramped up pro-communism propaganda across the country, spanning education, tourism, and politics.
South Korea has the highest number of Confucius institutes in the world. Some universities even have dedicated research centers for Xi Jinping thought. In the Gwangju region, there is even a proposal to establish a People's Liberation Army Square to commemorate the Chinese Communist Volunteer Army. The plan involves flying the CCP's military flag and playing its military songs, allegedly to attract Chinese tourists. This is simply unbelievable and utterly incomprehensible.
South Korea also shares close economic ties with China. On top of that,
over the past decade or so, a significant number of Chinese ethnic Koreans have gone to South Korea to study and then stayed there. The Chinese Communist Party has done extensive work in this area, and its influence is very strong. Some South Korean conservatives even believe that the CCP's influence in South Korea has grown to the point where it can affect South Korean elections.
Guo says the Indo-Pacific will be a key battlefield between China and U.S.-led alliances. The U.S. alliance includes European allies, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, while China's alliance includes Russia, North Korea, and Iran. South Korea is a vital ally to Washington in the region, sitting on the front line where democracies and authoritarian alliances meet. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Taiwan closed an emergency response center on Thursday. It was opened earlier this week in response to record Chinese military activities nearby. The closure appears to signal an end to Beijing's maneuvers. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te recently took his first overseas trip since taking office, including stopovers in the U.S. Soon after, China launched its largest military drills near the Taiwan Strait in decades on Monday. The U.S. is Taiwan's main source of weapons. An expert from Taiwan says Beijing has another related motive.
Of course, the CCP also aims to use this to test the U.S. response, especially since the U.S. is currently in a period of transition between administrations. Trump has not yet taken office. He will assume the presidency in a month, given the U.S. has a caretaker cabinet at this time during Biden's final days. To some extent, the CCP's military deployments are also observing what specific actions the U.S. might take during this period.
Earlier this week, President-elect Trump was asked in an NBC interview if he would commit to defending Taiwan. He said, quote, "I never say because I have to negotiate things." He also said he spoke with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping, but did not discuss the Taiwan issue. President-elect Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau exchanging tit-for-tat remarks about tariffs. How can the two leaders work together in the interest of national security? NTD's Steve Lance discussed tariffs and trade with Raymond Robertson, director of the Mosbacher Institute for Trade, Economics, and Public Policy at Texas A&M.
Now, 43 pounds of fentanyl were reportedly seized by Border Patrol agents at the Canadian border last year. Trump hopes that tariffs will motivate Canada to take action and crack down on this. Trudeau says that tariffs were politically impactful to the president's party and colleagues. How can Trudeau work with Trump in the national security realm to protect the interests of both countries?
That's a really great question. I think fentanyl is an absolute plague in the United States right now, and it's decimating families throughout the country, and something definitely needs to be done to stop the fentanyl crisis. It's not clear that Canada benefits from exporting fentanyl directly, though, in a way that would get the government to change its policies just because they're facing tariffs. I mean, what is the government of Canada not doing right now to address the fentanyl problem? That has never been made clear. Obviously, more coordinated efforts on both sides would go a long way. I think the intelligence community in the United States has a very important role to play in addressing the fentanyl crisis, but it's not clear that tariffs are the best way to motivate that kind of cooperation.
One of the U.S.'s largest trading partners is China. From a supply chain perspective, this supply chain with China is plagued by human rights abuses and unfair trade practices. How can the U.S., Mexico, and Canada perhaps work together to shift away from supply chains in China? And what other measures can the U.S. take to address the regime's unfair trade practices?
Sure, that's another great question. I think it's something we're going to hopefully work on in the next 4 years. One of the main things that we had tried to do was to encircle China with countries that adopted similar policies to ours through the TPP agreement. And that agreement was specifically designed to put pressure on China from other countries and its neighbors to adopt policies that are not trade unfriendly, that are not unfair. But of course, we lost that option when we pulled out of TPP. So now what are we trying to do? We're trying to encourage investment in other areas of the world that are more friendly to us, this friend-shoring idea, which includes Mexico. And companies have been leaving China and moving into Mexico, but one of the problems has been a lot of those companies are Chinese. So it's not really clear that even the investment that's moving out of China and the decoupling of China is really solving the underlying issue that we have with China.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.